Hi, hello, I'm Sam Harrison. I read, review and discuss fantasy and science fiction books, and today we're reviewing Path of Daggers by Robert Jordan. This is book 8 in the Wheel of Time, the first book past that halfway point. So this is a non-spoiler review. I will not be discussing in specific anything that happens in Path of Daggers. However, in order to talk about the book without just being completely vague and pointless, I will have to discuss things that have happened in the previous books. So if you haven't read any Wheel of Time books, now's your time to step off the train, go back, watch my Other World review, and then start reading these books because they are genuinely fantastic. I had a really interesting experience with this book, which I'm really excited to talk to you guys about. But I just wanted to let you know up front that I am also going to be doing a full spoiler discussion with my friend Matt from Bask in the Story. We've done a full spoiler discussion that's at least an hour long for every book in the Wheel of Time. And I think that this one is going to be another really interesting book to discuss. And hopefully we'll have that up on the channel in the next couple of weeks. So if you are watching this and you'd like to see more Wheel of Time content, there's not only probably about 20 videos in the playlist that you can look at down below, but there's also going to be some more stuff coming out in the near future. And on top of that, I have just recently went and asked a lot of my booktube buds and some of my favourite booktubers to tell me why they love the Wheel of Time. And so if you are interested in seeing answers from people like Philip Chase, Rich from Two to Ramble, and then Dan from Digger Dan Reads, there's a lot of really interesting people on that video, and I would really recommend watching it. You've probably also seen Nathaniel from Generic Entertainment a lot. If you're on booktube, you've probably seen his jokes and sketches, but he sent me this incredibly well made and heartfelt video about why he loves the series, and I left the whole thing in its entirety, so you guys can sit down and enjoy. Let's talk about the Path of Daggers though. So 8th book in the Wheel of Time. Path of Daggers is one of the first books that seems to be more accepted as being the slog. The slog is the section of Wheel of Time that its most ardent fans will tell you is bad. And I will tell you straight up, right at the beginning of this video, well, around 3 minutes in, I had to get all the self-promo in, of course. 3 minutes in, this book I gave 4 out of 5. I have only given, I think I've given 4 out of 5s in the Wheel of Time, and the other books I've given 5 out of 5. So for context, I think a 4 out of 5 is an absolutely fantastic book. I will say straight up the reason why this is a 4 out of 5 and not 5 out of 5. The characters are excellent, the plot is excellent, the individual stories that make up this book are excellent, but I really kind of felt like there was something missing. So this is the shortest book in the Wheel of Time, which, I mean, unless you include the prequel novella. It's not actually a novella, the prequel novel. This is the shortest book in the Wheel of Time, and I do think that probably adds to that feeling of there being something missing. It almost feels like Robert Jordan could have written another 100, 200 pages on the end of this book and really 100% nailed it for me. This book is also doing a classic Wheel of Time trick, which is completely excluding and barely even discussing one of the major protagonists, and adding all of those aspects together. This kind of felt to me even more episodic than Lord of Chaos and Crown of Swords. This in particular, I've been talking a little bit about how basically since Fires of Heaven, these books have felt a lot more episodic. So I'm going to put the book down, so I'm not just using it as a prop. So when we get past what is kind of considered to be the best book in the Wheel of Time, which is The Shadow Rising. I don't think it's my favourite. I think so far Lord of Chaos is actually my favourite. But you move from the way that fantasy books kind of are traditionally, which is that you have all the characters are together in the beginning of the book, then they go off on their adventures, and then they come together for the end of the book, and then there's a big fight. And that's what the 3 first books of the Wheel of Time are. And then you move into book 4, which is a little more separate. So in book 4, characters are kind of spread out a bit more. And then in books 5 and 6, they spread out even more than that. But we get something which is quite interesting that starts to happen in books 5, 6 and 7 and continues in book 8, and I think is probably strongest so far in book 8, which is that books begin to feel episodic. Stories begin in Path of Heaven, which conclude in Path of Daggers. And this isn't like, oh, there's a side story about XYZ thing. Like, I think that the weather stuff starts happening in Fires of Heaven. So for several books in a row now, the season has not been changing from summer to autumn, or autumn to winter, or summer to winter. And it's just been getting hotter and hotter and hotter because of the Dark One's influence on the world. And that is only really finally dealt with in this book. So Jordan has been talking about how hot everyone is for, you know, several thousand pages at this point. And I find it really interesting because every time I felt like that story was going to get wrapped up, there would be like a new wrinkle and it would end up hanging over into the next book. And it almost became the main focus story. Like, it was definitely the B story. The A story is kind of Rand's fight against the Forsaken and trying to kind of prepare the world for the final battle against the Dark One. But the B plot was kind of the Aes Sedai the Rebel Aes Sedai, led by Egwene, Elaine, Nynaeve, those characters that we've had since book 1 and 2. They have been working to try and fix the weather. And they finally do that in Path of Daggers. A very mild spoiler for you there, but that happens very early on in the book. And they've said they're going to do it at the very end of Crown of Swords. But one of the really interesting things here is that, like I was saying, you get these plot lines that kind of weave in and out. So this book, for example, there isn't really any overt Forsaken stuff in this. So there's a couple of Forsaken mentions, but we don't get what we've had over the past few books, which is like a big fight between Rand and a Forsaken. I wonder if that's because Jordan was like, well, I'm writing a lot of these books and I can't use all the Forsaken at once. I can't kill them all off. And he killed off like 2 in a single book a while back, and he killed off 2 in the first book, and there's only 13. So that only leaves him with like 9 left. And there's more of them have died since. So yeah, we've got this much more episodic nature. We have got Jordan's very subtle weaving of plots in and out of the story. So, for example, the plot line with the hot weather, the plot line with the Prophet of the Dragon, and that kind of span up in like book 3 or 4, and has been slowly becoming more and more and more important as the series has gone on. And I think we get to now, and where this book in particular leaves the storyline with the Prophet of the Dragon is really, really interesting to me. Perrin and Rand and Mat, and then Egwene and Nynaeve are kind of the original beating heart of this series. I think all of them are really interesting characters, and I would say that now Elaine and Avienda are also main characters. They have grown in importance across the books. And I'd say you've even got Min as well. Min has become more and more important as time has gone by. So you have these incredibly powerful characters in people like Elaine, Egwene, Nynaeve are very, very powerful with the one power. Rand obviously is the most powerful with the one power, as he is the Dragon Reborn. He's also got access to, you know, these Angreal, Terangreal, Sa'angreals, which all kind of augment his abilities. And there's actually a fairly pivotal scene in this book which kind of reframes the use of Sa'angreal for the Dragon Reborn, which I thought was really good and well done, and kind of gives Rand a new thing to be upset about, rather than just like, oh, I mean, he seems to really focus on women and putting women in danger, and he feels incredibly guilty for getting women killed on his behalf, as he's, you know, a general, he's a leader, he's a warrior. And, you know, I think we all forget that he's like 22 and he's from a very backwater village that, you know, has a very specific way of life and a way of seeing women, and he's moved beyond that in many ways, but is still, I think, struggling to come to terms with his role as a military leader in a world where women are fighters just as much as the men. And in fact, the Maidens of the Spear, who are kind of, they're not like Rand's personal guard, but they have kind of adopted him into their ranks as he's the son of a daughter of the Spear, Maiden of the Spear, and that revelation in previous books was genuinely fantastic as well. But I don't know whether I actually came back to that. I know Matt and I talked about it on the spoiler chat for that book, but we didn't come all the way back to it. I had a sneaky suspicion that Rand was in some way related to the King or Queen of Andor. It was interesting to see that his mother was the escaped queen. I did originally think that Moraine was going to end up being the escaped Queen of Andor, the one that just kind of disappeared, but it turns out that it was not Moraine. Sad, but true. Speaking of Moraine, there's been a few books now. I'm starting to wonder if Moraine might actually be dead. It would be a very unceremonious way for her and for Lanfear, who was incredibly important in the first kind of third quarter of the series, to take their way out. And it would surprise me that Rosamund Pike signed on to play Moraine in the show, knowing if she knew what was going on with Moraine, I maybe would have cast her as Morghese, something like that. I mean, Morghese is, I mean, I'm kind of flitting all around here. It's very late at night. I finished the book, not first thing this morning, but a few, you know, most of a day ago. However, this one's taken me weirdly long to read because I've been not having as much time to read lately, and my brain is kind of all over the place when it comes to this book. I will say that all my friends who've read The Wheel of Time are like, the way that you talk about Wheel of Time and the way that you are enjoying Wheel of Time, even the books that they themselves did not like, they're like, you're going to love it. There's not going to be a single bad book in it for you. A few people have said that I might struggle with book 10, but I've already picked up, I own the entire series physically, but I've got Winter's Heart off the shelf, and I'm kind of thinking about reading this one a bit sooner than originally planned. though it is it's the end of the month, so actually I was like, oh, I'll read 2 in 1 month, but I'm not going to get to it anyway. So we should probably go back through characters, shouldn't we? Let's start with, I think, the most important characters in this book. So Elaine, Egwene, and Nynaeve. Avienda is in several chapters of this book. However, I feel like she takes a real back seat to the other female leads. I feel it's quite interesting as well. It feels like Elaine is a big... it's one of those things where I feel like reading across the books that Elaine is like Jordan's favourite female character, because she has... it feels like she has the most POVs in this book, or at least she has the ones that I was like, oh, these are really well done. And she has just grown in importance across the books. She's become, more often, she is the POV on Aes Sedai stuff, so that we get this kind of third person view of Nynaeve, which is very good, because Elaine and Nynaeve are very much like besties, but they also have a bit of animosity between the two of them. Yeah, so Elaine is kind of in charge of the group of rebel Aes Sedai that are kind of fled the Seanchan in Abu Dara. She's in charge of them via kind of... Aes Sedai kind of defer to people who are the most powerful, and though Elaine is not as powerful as Nynaeve, she has that kind of regal nature. And also I think that Nynaeve and Elaine are, even though Elaine isn't as powerful as Nynaeve, I think Elaine and Nynaeve are meant to be more powerful than most of the other people there. And they've also got with them the Kin and the Knitting Circle, and a couple of Aes Sedai who were advising the Queen of Abu Dara. Yeah, it's a really interesting set of characters, group of characters. And of course we've also got Birgitte, who is Elaine's warder, the first female warder, as far as I can remember. I'm pretty sure it's talked about as being quite unique because she's the first female warder. Yeah, so I think that they are kind of in the middle of the Seanchan stuff. The Seanchan stuff is super interesting. They seem to be a really unique group, like a unique kind of military fighting force. Like, they have the giant bats, they have like war elephants, they have what sounds like maybe lizards, and then they dress like bugs as well, so like their helmets are shaped like bugs. I do really want to know more about the Seanchan, and it's been prophesied that Mat is going to marry the daughter of the Nine Moons, and the Nine Moons stuff is all Seanchan stuff. So my firm hope is that Mat gets deeply entwined in Seanchan stuff over the near future in these books. I'm pretty certain that the girls leave Mat behind in Abu Dara, which would mean that he's obviously kind of in the thick of it with these Seanchan. Hopefully Winter's Heart is a Mat heavy book, because that would be really good to get some more time with Mat. I feel like The Dragon Reborn was very Mat heavy, and then basically none of the other books have been Mat heavy in the same way. This one has been quite... It's hard to identify who the most... what's the term? Who the like most common characters we see as POVs are. It feels like it's Elaine, and then there's a big section in the middle about Egwene and the politics of her running the rebel Aes Sedai, which I really enjoyed. As you guys know, I like the Aes Sedai politics stuff. One of the big things that I'll relate this anecdote, and I've probably told this already. We went to, me and Ross and Laura went to Blackwell's science fiction and fantasy specialty shop in Oxford, and this is the only Blackwell's in the entire country that specialises in SFF. And the manager there was like incredibly smart and funny, and like he loved books. He knew everything. And I mentioned that I was reading Wheel of Time, and I'd just finished reading Lord of Chaos, and he was like, oh, I hated that one, what a slog, it's just women arguing in a forest. And I mean, I kind of felt like Egwene's stuff, this book, is mostly women arguing in the forest. However, the thing that I really liked about that was, I mean, one, and this isn't really anything to do with the book, I actually read those chapters via audiobook while walking around a forest. So I was on holiday in Center Parcs this weekend, and Center Parcs, if you're not aware, if you're American or whatever, is basically like a like family-friendly holiday resort, but instead of being like on a beach or somewhere like that, it's in the middle of a massive forest, and everything is all about, you know, getting back to nature and things like that, but in a very safe, city boy safe way of getting back to nature. I don't know why I call myself a city boy. I haven't lived in the city since 2016, and like I've run an ultra marathon across the British countryside. Like I know my countryside. Anyway, so yeah, I really enjoyed the stuff with Egwene, and her kind of like manoeuvring Ramonda and the other Aes Sedai that she doesn't like around. That was really good. I continue to enjoy Swan Sanche. I feel like when you don't get POVs from Swan, you get less boat and fishing metaphors, which she literally will not shut up about. I don't know if you guys knew this, but she grew up in a fishing village, and her dad was a fisherman, and she knows how to fish. And you get a lot less of that when she's not the POV, because you don't get to hear her say it and also think it, which you get a lot in her POVs. Her relationship with Gareth Bryn seems to be evolving a little bit in this book, which is really interesting, and I'm really curious to see where a lot of the relationships go. Fael and Perrin has managed to feel now to be quite true and organic to how many real relationships work, and I think that Gareth Bryn and Swan is actually, it does feel quite realistic and quite true to, you know, like past, or not past, like quite true to romantic stuff that either I or friends of mine have gone through, and kind of the almost like a will they won't they really with Gareth Bryn and Swan, which is fun because I like both those characters. I would really like to see more Gareth Bryn. I really enjoyed the POV chapters we got from him earlier in the series, and I would like to see some more from him now. I'd like to kind of see from his point of view what he thinks of Egwene. I think that would be really interesting. So yeah, let's move away from the female characters and on to, well, Matt, who isn't in the book. I know I said, you know, they left him behind in their boudoir. I'm pretty certain that he's only referenced enough times, you know, on one hand. And the book does feel a little poorer for the lack of Matt this time round, because Matt is also a bit of a source of levity, and you don't have as much of that this time round. There weren't any like chuckling moments for me, which there have been in a lot of the previous books. I've frequently referred back to the section in The Dragon Reborn where Matt sees the Stone of Tyr, and he's like, oh my god, those walls are basically sheer straight up. Only some sort of madman would climb those walls. And then literally the next paragraph is, Rand surmounted the walls after climbing it. So Jordan feels quite self-aware in the way that he's thinking about these things. And yeah, no Matt in this one. Perrin we get, and Rand are used very sparingly in this. So Perrin has been sent by Rand to kind of try and track down Masema, who is calling himself the Prophet of the Dragon, and get him to stop doing some other heinous shit that he's been doing, like killing people and enslaving people and burning villages and fields and things like that. So Perrin's been sent out to look for him and to try and kind of stop him from doing this stuff, or kill him. But Perrin is staunchly against killing him. Perrin's very anti-violence, kind of in general, so that kind of makes sense. And then we move on to Rand. So Rand is used very sparingly in this book, and I think that one of the interesting things about the Rand stuff is that both of the big Rand bits are kind of action sequences. So we have the fight against the Seanchan, and then we have the attack on the Sun Palace. And I think that the fight with the Seanchan is very good, and I really enjoyed him talking through and discussing the kind of like political landscape of his warband, which is really interesting. I do still like his relationship with Min. I think I prefer him and Elaine. They feel a bit more like contemporaries to me, whether that's correct or not, but they feel a bit more like contemporaries. And so yeah, they're like my favourite couple, I guess, out of the Rand and the three women he's apparently going to marry all three. Interesting that Elaine keeps saying that she wants to bond Rand as a warder when he's already bonded to Alanna. And quite interesting to read Rand's POV, his thoughts on Alanna in this one, because there's a couple of times that he is like glad she's safe, which is very interesting because it implies to me that they're growing closer, and I would really like to see the kind of difference between Rand's relationship with Alanna now, after he's kind of grown accustomed to her, and then thrown to the mix the three girls that are all in love with him. So yeah, that could be a very interesting storyline down the road. I know that Matt basically becomes polyamorous king, so I don't imagine that they're going to be adding a fourth wife with Alanna, but I would genuinely be curious to see what happens there, because there's definitely some interesting plots going on with Alanna and Rand specifically. In terms of the world building and the rest of the stuff, I really enjoyed the Seanchan chapters. So there was quite a few chapters that had short POVs from the Seanchan general. Those were really interesting, and there's like a Seanchan pilot, because obviously they fly the bats. So there's like a Seanchan pilot POV, which was really good. And I would be interested in seeing more from the Seanchan in general, because I think that they are a really cool idea, and I like the thought that there's like, you know, all of the all the peoples of this continent, and they're struggling to get it together and stop infighting and get prepared for the Dark One's return. And then just as they're like, Rand's kind of got the major nations in line, these Seanchan just turn up. Very interesting. I hope that the Seanchan war carries on for a little bit longer, because I would like to see more from all of those characters and how they kind of deal with being part of this war when the real fight is coming with the Dark One, you know? So a lot of interesting stuff there. As I said before, I think Morghese is basically my favourite minor character, and she's got some good stuff in this one. All of it is from the POV of other characters, where she's undercover as kind of part of one of the other major characters' supporting casts, under a fake name, and that was really interesting. I'm struggling. I need to stop saying interesting so much, but this book was very interesting, and there's no real negatives to this book. I'd never read a chapter and was like, ugh, that was rubbish, or like, I wish I hadn't read that. I enjoyed the entire experience from start to finish. Honestly, page 1 to page 570, great time. But it kind of felt to me like something was missing. I've talked before about how books sometimes don't have that 5-star sparkle. They don't like ignite in me the love for reading. They don't push me all the way to 5 stars. This one got close, but no cigar. This one's just a 4-star review from me. Very interested to see what I think of the next 2 books, because they are, of course, deep into the slog now. And many people have said that they believe that book 10 is categorically the worst book in the series, and I'm genuinely curious to see what I will think. And if you're also curious to see what I will think, one of the best ways to do that and be notified about what I'm doing is to click the bell icon and to subscribe to the channel. If you have liked this video while you're on the way down to subscribe, or if you're on the way down to check that bell notification if you haven't done that already, then make sure that you like this video. And of course, while you're there, there's an opportunity to leave a comment. So let me know who your favourite Wheel of Time character is and why. And then you can prove to everyone else that you've watched the entire episode, unlike some people who will watch the first 30 seconds and then ditch, which is like 20% of people, and that's a very weird choice to make. Maybe they just don't like my voice. Maybe I should start doing impressions in the video. I was showing my wife earlier all the fun voices that I do for our son when I read stories, and she was very impressed, but I won't do that on air because that would probably embarrass me. Thanks so much for watching. I have really enjoyed talking to you guys about Wheel of Time, really enjoyed reading Wheel of Time, and I would love for you to join the community, subscribe to the channel, and stick around, and there will be more Wheel of Time content coming very, very soon. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.